Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here from the Writ.ca, and welcome to this new episode of the Writ Show. We're going to go over the latest polls as we are now in the final 2 weeks of this election campaign. We're actually within 2 weeks of voting day, if you can believe it. So let's take a look at where the numbers stand right now. So the Liberals are still leading in the poll tracker, which is the aggregation of all the polls that are being published. You know, we've got so many polls during this campaign. We've actually been getting at least 3 a day. And sometimes there's another 3 or 4 that are also released. So there's a lot of numbers to keep track of. So that's why the poll tracker is there, to try to average them out, give you a good idea of where things stand, where the consensus is on any given day. And the consensus right now is that the Liberals are leading with 44% support. The Conservatives are just under 38%. So right now we're looking at a gap of 6.2 points between the Liberals and the Conservatives. To put that into context, it has been pretty stable for the last little while, but a week ago, the gap between the two parties was 7 points. So we do seem to be seeing a small shrinking of the margin between the two parties, but the Liberals still have a pretty significant and electorally decisive advantage. The NDP is in third place with 8.2%. They've been really stuck between that 8 and 9%. They keep going up and down in my average. They can't either get above 9 or drop below 8. So that does seem to be the floor for this party, and it really is the floor. The party is at one of its worst levels. If they hold this amount of the vote straight through to Election Day, they'll only have done worse once in all of their history, and that was in the 1993 election when they took just over 6% of the vote. The Bloc Québécois is at 5.3% across the country. The Greens are at 2%. They're on track for some very low results, and as is the People's Party at just 1.6% in the national polling average. Now, as to the seat projections, right now we have the Liberals leading with 198 seats, which is more than the 172 you need for a majority government. The Conservatives are at 121, so pretty much exactly where they were in the last election. The Bloc Québécois is at 18 seats, so they could drop pretty much half of their caucus, and the NDP is down still to 5. That does seem, again, to be a bit of a floor for them. The Greens are at 1 seat, the People's Party and others are at 0. Now, in terms of the likely ranges, the Liberals are favored to win between 176 and 215 seats, so they're over that majority threshold, but if you've been watching for the last little while, they are creeping down a little bit more closer to that 172 seat mark in the floor, the lower range of the projection. The Conservatives are between 107 and 135 seats, the Bloc between 15 and 23, the NDP between 1 and 13, and the Greens right now are at 0 to 1. Now, in terms of the chances of winning, we have 87% chance that the Liberals would win a majority government with these kinds of numbers. They would have a 12% chance of a minority government, so it's about a 1 in 10 chance that with these kinds of numbers, we would expect the Liberals to fall short of the 172 seats they need for that majority government. The Conservatives are still only at a 2% chance of winning the most seats. That 2% is based entirely on the possibility that the polls are not only wrong, but epically wrong, historically wrong. Wrong in a way that we have never really seen in a modern election. Anything is possible, of course, but it would be something really for the record books if the Conservatives were able to win this election based on where things are now. Now, things will change between now and April 28th, but with these kinds of numbers, if these were the numbers we were seeing on April 27th, the day before the election, the Conservatives would have virtually no chance of winning the election. It would only be in a historically exceptional outcome. That's why the Conservatives really need to improve their numbers over the last 13 days of this campaign if they're going to have any chance of being in contention, not only even having a chance, but being in the running to win this election. Now let's run through the regions of the country. The Liberals are leading by about 3 points right now in British Columbia, so that is shrinking. We did see before that the gap that they had started to open up over the Conservatives was getting to the 5 or 6 point mark in British Columbia, so we are seeing a tighter race out in BC. In Alberta, the race is still pretty one-sided. It's 30% for the Liberals, but 57% for the Conservatives. The NDP at just 9% in that province. In Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we have the Conservatives leading with 51% support. The Liberals are second with just over 33%, and the NDP is at 12%. And in Ontario, it is 49% support for the Liberals, 38% for the Conservatives, 8% for the NDP. This is one area where we haven't seen a shrinking of the margin. That 11-point gap is pretty much exactly where it was last week, and it's even wider than it was 2 weeks ago. The Conservatives can't close that gap in Ontario. They cannot win the election. And Quebec is one of the regions that is helping Liberals win. They're at 43% right now in the province. The Bloc Québécois is second with 24%. Conservatives are third with 23%, and the NDP has just over 5% support. Finally, in Atlantic Canada, we're looking at a pretty big gap for the Liberals, 55% support, with 35% for the Conservatives and 7% for the NDP. Now, as always, I try to answer a few questions, and these I got two questions that were kind of similar, so I thought I would answer them. It was really more of a deep dive into what's happening in Alberta. Obviously, Alberta is not going to decide the outcome of this election because the Conservatives are the favorites, the huge favorites, in most of the seats. It's just a handful that really the NDP is in contention for, and the Liberals are in contention for a few of them as well. So let's go into what we're looking at in Alberta. Now, in terms of the questions, from Kyle, he was asking, with so many seats, all in Edmonton and half in Calgary, apparently in play this election, is this the Conservatives' worst performance in Alberta ever? And also this question from Ruben, do you really think that Edmonton could return more than 2 Liberals, or is support going to be too concentrated in specific areas? So let's head back to the poll tracker and look at where things are in Alberta. So yes, 57% for the Conservatives, 30% for the Liberals. And right now the seat projections in the province are 24 to 32 for the Conservatives, 4 to 11 for the Liberals, and 1 to 2 for the NDP. Now, how have things really shifted since the last election? Well, let's take a look in Alberta. I'll go through here in the poll tracker model. Now, first of all, let's look at where things were in 2021. 55% support for the Conservatives. So right now they're up really about 1.5 points, not really all that much. The NDP's at 19% last time. They're at 9% this time. So they've dropped 10 points. And the Liberals have doubled. They've gone from 15% to now 30%. And that is why they're going to have an ability to win some more seats. Now, the question I got from Kyle was whether this could end up being the worst result in the history of the party. It is actually not likely to be the worst result in the history of the party overall, but it could be one of the poorest results, I suppose, for the Conservatives in many decades. Alberta has not been friendly territory to the Liberals or the NDP for a very, very long time. Now, it's elected lots of non-conservatives in the sense that it's elected some Canadian Alliance MPs, some Reform MPs, and before that, Social Credit. But those were all parties of the right. Parties of the left, parties of the center haven't been very successful in Alberta in a very long time. So the high watermark for non-conservative parties over the last 2 elections has been 5 seats. The Liberals won 4 seats in Alberta in 2015, and the NDP won 1. And in the last election, we saw there were 2 NDP MPs and 2 Liberal MPs. If the Liberals end up winning at least 4 and the NDP wins 2, so 6 seats, that would already be a high watermark for non-conservative parties in Alberta. If the Liberals are able to win many more seats in Edmonton and Calgary, maybe 6, 7, 8, and the NDP can also win 2, it would be the most seats we've seen going to non-conservative parties since the Liberals won 7 seats in 1940. It's been a long time. Alberta, before the discovery of oil and the development of the oil industry, was an agricultural province a lot like Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and was actually a pretty solid Liberal territory for the first decades of its history. The first governments in Alberta were Liberal, and after that it was United Farmers, which have a bit more of a complicated political legacy, but one of their successor parties was the CCF. So it does show that in the first decades of Alberta, the voters were actually pretty left-wing. Things really changed in that province. So we could see that the non-conservative parties could win the most seats in Alberta in decades. Now, will they actually do it? And that gets to the question that Ruben was asking. So he brings up the question that, could instead the Liberals actually winning many more seats in Edmonton and Calgary, that they just run up the numbers in seats that they've won before? Edmonton Centre, Edmonton Southeast, those are ridings that they won in 2015, and if their vote is going up again this time, they would be likely to win both of those again. Could they win some other seats in Edmonton? Edmonton Gateway, Riverbend, Manning, some of those ridings, if we do see the kind of swing that we've seen in the polls, suggest they could be in contention. It is going to be tough for them to win it, though, because these are areas that tend to vote pretty conservative, and the Liberals really need to see their vote go up pretty uniformly across the city in order to take those seats. If instead they do actually run up the numbers in areas where they already have support, where they can already win, and don't quite win as much new vote as they want in some of the other parts of Edmonton, it is possible that they could come up short in terms of the projections. In Calgary, it's the same kind of thing. So Calgary and McKnight is their incumbent riding. That's where George Chahal is running. And expect that with the uptick in Liberal support in Alberta, they should be able to hold a seat that they won last time. Calgary Skyview, which is a different riding that incorporates part of the old riding of Calgary Skyview that George Chahal won in the last election. Is there enough residual Liberal support for that seat to also go to the Liberals? Then there's 2 other ones to look at in Calgary. Calgary Centre, which the Liberals did win in 2015, and Calgary Confederation, where the Liberals have been pretty competitive over the last couple elections when they've done a little bit better in Alberta. So will we see that the Liberal vote in Calgary will be concentrated in some of the ridings where they already have a good shot of winning? Or will it be broad enough that they can actually lift enough votes that they elect more than just a handful of MPs? It is a big question in this election for me, how well the Liberals will do in Alberta. We have seen in the past that the polls can underestimate Conservative support in the province, but a lot of that underestimation takes place outside of the cities. So if the Conservatives end up doing 10 points better in rural Alberta, it's not going to make them more competitive in Edmonton and Calgary. So it'll be something to watch. It does seem likely that the Liberals will have one of their best results in Alberta in decades, at least in terms of the popular vote. But will they actually be able to win many more seats or just win some of the ones that they were able to win last time? We'll have to wait and see. And that'll be it for this episode of The Writ Show. Thanks again for watching, for liking, for subscribing to this channel, and for leaving your questions. Leave me some questions in the comments. I'll try to get to them in my next episode, which will come out later this week. And it's going to be a big week. They've got the 2 debates, French language debate on Wednesday, English language debate on Thursday. If something's going to happen in this campaign, is something going to change those trend lines that I was talking about earlier on? It could be what happens in those debates this week. So tune into the debates later this week, and then tune into The Writ Show, and we'll take a look at what the polls say is the outcome, the repercussions, the influence of those debates on public opinion and what's going to happen on election night on April 28th. So until next time, thanks for watching.